I come out from the back there. It's very exciting. That was an amazing interview to start the day, and this next one's going to be fantastic. Doug Dorst is the author of 2 novels, S, written with J.J. Abrams, and Alive in Micropolis, as well as a short story collection, The Surf Guru, and a play, Monster in the Dark, with Fuels Fury Theater of San Francisco. He has received an MFA from the Mecca of Creative Writing, the Iowa Writers Workshop. He also holds a JD from UC Berkeley, is a former Wallace Stegner Fellow at Stanford, and was awarded the Literary Fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts. He is currently writing for the new Amazon drama Z and directing the MFA program in creative writing at Texas State University. Anyone that can take a stack of blank paper and find the inspiration and stamina to turn that into a novel has my ultimate respect. It is a thrill to welcome the New York Times bestselling author, Mr. Doug Dorst, to the stage. But first, let's take a look at this. Very cool.
Thank you.
Have a seat. What you just saw was this new book that Doug's written with J.J. Abrams. It's just amazing. And we're going to raffle off 10 of these to all of you today, so there'll be some lucky winners. And the rest of you, go out and buy it. Although you can't stick this in a Kindle. This is just, I don't know if this is a book or a piece of art or what is it. This is just amazing, Doug. Tell us about the process, how this came up, and how this all happened.
Well, the first thing that happened to me is I got a phone call just out of the blue asking me if I might be interested in doing a project with J.J. Abrams. And I said, no, of course not.
Yeah.
Don't call me at this number ever again. But no, I mean, and I was a huge fan of his, and I had 2 books out, but I'm not, I'm not a writer on anyone's map really. So it was a very surprising phone call to get, and I followed up with it, and they, when we got to talking about it, they said, okay, JJ, JJ had been carrying this idea around for 10, 15 years. He'd found a book. He was at LAX and he'd found a copy of a paperback just left out on a bench outside the airport. I think it was a Robert Ludlum novel. And inside the front cover, someone had written to whoever finds this, please enjoy it and pass it on. And that got him thinking about how we can use books to communicate with each other, can use the actual physical book as a way of connecting to people. And so he said, wouldn't it be cool to do a book project that really took advantage of that? And he held on to that idea. I mean, he's kind of a busy dude.
Right.
And they came to me and said, okay, we would love to do a book that sort of a novel in the form of margin notes between 2 readers reading another novel. What kind of story would you, does that sound interesting to you? And what kind of story would you try to tell? And it was interesting to me. I love fiction in non-traditional forms. I'm kind of a puzzle guy, so I like the challenge of trying to find a story that fits really well with a particular formal framework, especially an odd one. And I'd been carrying around this idea of a sort of mysterious European writer from the early 20th century. No one knows who he is, and people are trying to find out. And that seemed like a story that would fit well. We would have his final novel, this enigmatic writer's final novel, and 2 students who are really engaged in the book and in the mystery about the author's life, and they're kind of falling in love at the same time in the margins. And so we talked about it. We went back and forth talking about characters and themes and how the book would actually work, what the reader's experience would be. We went back and forth for about a year or more, then put together a concept chapter and went out to publishers. And then after we sold the book, they said, "Okay, Doug, take it and run with it. And you have a year and a half." At which point I realized what I'd gotten myself into, because it didn't really occur to me until it was too late that I'd agreed to write 2 novels, including
They get
one.
paid for one.
Yeah, including one that had to pass as, if not a classic of Western literature, at least something that people would plausibly study 70 years later.
I just think it's amazing that someone hadn't thought of this earlier.
I know.
You know, that's the first thing that came to my mind, because I grew up in the library, and it just loved when somebody would write in the book, either mischievously, like I did at times, or that there were these little nuggets of things that you got, and you wondered, who was that? Where is this person? What are they doing now? And then just in college as well, I didn't have the money to buy new books when I first got there, so I always bought used books, but I found the genius of the used books were all of these little notes that really helped you along the way.
Yeah, sometimes sometimes it deepens your experience. Sometimes it's just this sort of really great sort of voyeuristic experience where you're just getting a glimpse of someone else's life. And one of the things we did with this is the book is actually, so you'll see, I mean, the book is distressed. It's an old copy of the book that one of the characters has stolen from his high school library and been toting around for 10 years. And it has some of his personal notes. So you get a glimpse of who he was 10 years ago. And those are all mixed in with the notes that are being made now, with between him and the other person who joins him in the inquiry.
It's terrific. Tell me about the process now. You said, oh my God, I got to write 2 books. Now, writing one book to me is just a monumental, I can almost not wrap my head around that. Even being a writer, starting out as a writer, I just think about that passage, being alone, trying to figure this out, putting the outline together, whatever process I would take. But you're going to write 2 books now. How did you approach this? What was going through your mind, and what got you to that finish line?
I mean, a few things. One of which was that there was a really tight deadline. And I didn't really have the luxury to agonize and worry as much as I might normally have. So that's one thing. I mean, the other thing is that I was working with J.J. Abrams. So, I mean, as far as having, at the same time, a safety net and a sage on call and a cheerleader too. I mean, these are really, really helpful things for sort of approaching the great unknown and the great worry of a book that isn't written yet. So JJ he's someone who knows story inside out. So when we were tossing ideas back and forth, I mean, it really did. I mean, we had a pretty good idea of the shape of it, or at least what the feel would be like. So I wasn't out there completely on my own. And then, I would do drafts of chapters and send them out to him and get notes back. And almost always the notes were, "This is fantastic. Feel free to get weirder. Go deeper, get stranger."
Sounds like the direction I gave my boss.
Yeah. But I mean, I think, because, I mean, there are several different narrative levels in the book. And I kept thinking of ways to make the narrative more complex. Not that I was seeking to, but that's just where it seemed to get interesting to me. So you've got the main text, you've got the margin notes, but then I started hearing the voice of the translator of the original book, and she started making her own footnotes, and she's her own character. But then there's also something going on. The footnotes actually seem to be talking to the writer of the first. So, I mean, again, we're about like 6 narrative levels deep.
Yeah.
And there's a part of me, I think, that was thinking, I'll never get away with this. This can't be a good idea. And every step of the way, JJ was saying, no, our purpose here is to make the coolest, most fun, most interesting book that we can. Let's err on the side of making a mess, clean up what we have to, and sort of trust the process that will end up with something that is, a unique thing, a strange, unique, and wonderful thing.
It's wonderful. I mean, that's definitely hit it. Now, it's been out, and have you done any research? I don't know if research is the right word. How are people reading it? Are they reading the book first? Are they reading the story in the margins first? Are they reading it together linearly, each page, devouring everything? Or is it just, who the hell knows? Everyone's doing something different.
There's a lot of stuff out there, and I think there have been a lot of people who really want one answer. They really do want they believe that there's a right way, and they want to make sure that they're locked in on it. But I think there isn't. And I've been asked many times, what's the right way to read it? And there's so much information in there. I mean, again, you've got the source text, the margin notes, the footnotes, the inserts. That's an awful lot to absorb, and I kind of think we're all wired a bit differently. One of the things that I've heard a lot is people saying, like, well, it took me like 25, 30 pages where I had to try a bunch of different approaches. I did feel like I was banging my head against the wall for a lot of it. But then I found my groove with it. And their brain sort of showed them the best way for them to engage with it. And I've said, frankly, I'm the last person who should be asked if there's a way to read it, because I've never had to read it cold.
Yeah.
I mean, I built it up in layers, so I have no idea what it's like to attempt to process it all at once.
Did you build it that way? Left to right in a linear fashion? Did you go chapters where you were writing the subtext or the narrative and then overlay? How did you actually end up doing it, if you could tell us?
Yeah, sure. We took to the publishers, just the prologue and the first chapter with the margin notes there. And to do that, I did the source text first, this novel by V.M. Straka. And then we, put that together. When it was time to finish the book, my instinct, and everyone agreed, the thing to do is actually finish writing Ship of Theseus, the Straka novel, write that all the way to the end, and get that working. Because if the source novel doesn't work, the whole thing falls apart as just a gimmick. That novel has to be interesting on its own. And that's where the majority of the time went, doing a few drafts and trying to get Ship of Theseus to work on its own terms. And after that, then, I think it was 2-3 drafts of Ship of Theseus. Then I went back and started layering in the two voices, the voices of the two readers. And that took about 2-3 drafts, because, again, you gotta, it's tough to do. It's tough to nail a character just in dialogue. I know, TV and film people do it all the time, but in fiction, it's a little trickier.
It's more in the head.
But then it actually, it was fairly easy to layer in the margin conversation, because I wrote Ship of Theseus. There are so many shared themes and shared concerns that it became very easy to find places where these characters would see fit to comment or react, or where they'd be moved by something. So that was probably a bit easier than maybe it looks from the outside.
This is a weird book in the sense that you're writing a book based on another novelist first. Is there a part of this is more you than others? Did you become like some part of the inside of you, one of the characters in the margins? Did you actually feel like you were part of the base novel, or did you have to dig in to find another character to write that? How did you think about it? How much of you is in this? Do you feel pulled into it? I don't even know what I'm asking.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think I get it.
Yeah.
It's it was a bit of a struggle. I think there were probably times that I got a little method with it, like trying to feel like V.M. Straka. It maybe more often than not, it wasn't quite that deep, but I was aware of having to make choices that were different from the choices that Doug Dorst, would make writing a Doug Dorst novel.
Right.
And in a way, I mean, that was kind of freeing. The story could be, there's no question, the story got stranger. I think it's the strangest thing I've done. It's probably the most narratively intricate thing that I've done. And in some ways, I got to say, okay, well, you get to a point where some big decision has to be made. The characters are here. This thing happens. What next? I would brainstorm a list of 10 ideas, and probably 5 of them would seem like sensible writerly things to do, and then I got to choose from the other 5. It was a way of saying, let me do something that doesn't necessarily seem like a good idea. It doesn't necessarily seem like a decision that I've been trained to make, and let the story get stranger and less like me. But I definitely caught. I mean, we all have our own voices. We all have our own ways of, and there were definitely points where I caught my own voice coming in there, where Straka gives way to Dorst, here and there, and I had to try to
Was
pull
it
it back.
easier to have someone like JJ to bounce this back to? Did it make it more difficult? And tell us were there ever a moment in this where you're like, what am I doing? I'm completely stuck. And how did you get out of it?
It did make it easier to have JJ there. I mean, absolutely, because again, I mean, I think, I believed on some level that no matter how badly I might mess this up or however lost I might get, I've got someone there who's really, really smart about story, and he'll help me find my way out. It was difficult, though, because, it's J.J. Abrams' first book project, which means that there are a lot of expectations, both, with his fans and in the publishing industry, and for him as well. And so, there was a little bit of pressure there that, 3, 4 a.m., where on those long, long nights of writing, that starts to weigh a little heavily.
Oh, yeah.
But I was able to keep it mostly at bay, I suppose. I lost track of the last part of the question. I'm sorry.
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
It's okay. You've done enough. I'm going to open this up to the audience, and after a question here or two. It's a disruptive book in the sense that publishing's all moved to another place, right? This is kind of flipping something that's been flipped back onto its own head. How do you feel about that? And is this a new model for you going forward, or is this just a one-off thing? How are you thinking about putting pen to paper from here on in?
Well, I think it's, that was definitely part of that was at the heart of the project from the beginning, which is we love physical books. It's not knocking the electronic book, but there's something about the physical book that feels sacred. So let's embrace that. And let's not just do a physical book, but let's put stuff between the pages and include all these physical artifacts, and make it the most physical thing that we can. As far as what my next book will look like, I'm not sure. I mean, I've been playing with a couple of ideas. And some of those ideas are asking questions with respect to form. Some are asking questions with respect to narrative complexity. And there's one idea that's just a simple, straightforward comedy. It's not that. So I don't know, whichever gets finished first, I suppose. I don't have a big dog in the fight. I'm pretty cool with physical books and electronic books coexisting. Although I'm personally an analog guy. It's how I enjoy reading better. We were actually going to not. There is an electronic version of this.
Oh, okay.
And for the longest time, the plan was not to offer it. Like, that would be kind of a statement that we're not going to offer an electronic version. But the publisher, we didn't quite win that battle. But actually, so the electronic version, while I don't think it's the ideal way to read this book, it is really cool. And you get to one of the pages where there's an insert, and the insert sort of unfolds and is there for you. Yeah. And they also, so they designed it beautifully. And it's also got this function where you can toggle off all the margin notes and get a clean read of the Straka novel, which, that's something that the analog version can't do. And it's a very cool thing. So I think I learned an important lesson there, not to be too much of a dogmatic Luddite.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think that's cool, and I didn't know that. When are you writing the screenplay for this? Because J.J. Abrams is probably going to make a movie of this.
But, you know, from the very beginning, JJ said, this is a book. We're making a book. And I think because at the heart of the plan for it was like, let's make the bookiest book we can make.
Yeah.
You know, why try to turn it into a medium to which it's less suited? And I think that's cool. So I don't think there's going to be any adaptation of it.
Just like there wasn't going to be an electronic book. We'll see.
We'll see.
All right, let's open this up to some questions for Doug.
So this is a very esoteric question. I'm sorry for starting with something so geeky, but what did the manuscript for this thing look like? In particular, what did the marginalia look like when you were writing it, and what was the process of translating that into the handwritten script? Like, did somebody literally write all of those things, and was there a common writer for one character and a common writer, so we have the handwriting?
Yeah, so the very first iteration of it, the one we took out to publishers, it was a Microsoft Word document with me doing both handwritings, just sort of turning the page, like, one reader would be the page at a 45-degree angle. And it was pretty, pretty sad. And clearly not the way that it was going to go for the rest of the thing. And then I started using the Microsoft Word comments function as a way of getting the margin notes into the document and formatting them, because the margin notes are color-coded and there's all sorts of text formatting in there, which worked out fairly well, but also Microsoft Word is not built to do that. And it would crash every 10 minutes or so. So especially when I was editing and it was a huge document, I had that save reflex going. And pretty much every keystroke I was saving. So when it actually got to the designers, and yes, they did a casting call at the design office, and they cast two of the lead designers. One was Eric and one was Jen, and that's their handwriting. Mm-hmm. We were sort of up against a deadline, and the question of the size of the margins was an important one, because I think we realized there has to be enough margin space to do this work. But if there's too much, it's going to look like a kindergarten book, or it has to at least feel plausible, if not perfectly likely, that the margins would be this large. At the last minute, the designers came back to us and said, you know what, if we're going to avoid the kindergarten margins, you have to cut about 20-25% of the margin story. And this was about a week before the deadline.
Wow.
So I flew to New York, and my editor and I spent 4 days in a hotel room just cutting to get it to fit in. Yeah. And we did it. And actually that too was a really good experience, because nothing was really lost. Mm-hmm. That was a whole lot of extra words that I'd just thrown in there, and it got so much tighter. So it was the design requirement very much improved the final version of the text. And I think pretty much all of the foreign editions have been handwritten, with one or two exceptions. I believe the French version, they used handwriting fonts.
The French are always,
But I think it's you can tell, and it doesn't have that magic to it. It's static. Okay. And the cool thing, the handwriting changes in this book. Like you can tell when a character is getting a little agitated, or the way she's writing at the beginning is not at all. It's her handwriting at the end, but she has grown, and the handwriting reflects that. Mm-hmm. And it's cool to have that as another element of characterization, which then is lost, of course, when you're just using fonts.
Right.
Yeah.
I love all the things just stuck in the pages, the map, the pictures. Did that come from the designers just thinking about this as they were reading it and bringing their own creativity to the project as well? How did that all come place?
That was, from the beginning, we knew we wanted to include extra stuff that would deepen the story and or be cool. And, so as I wrote, I kept a little wish list of stuff that I thought would be cool to include, and JJ had said, like, we'll worry about what's practical or what's a good idea. We'll worry about that later.
Okay.
So I did not have to edit myself
great.
at all. And we got to the end, and it was actually pretty clear, like, which 20, 25 pieces were going to serve the story or deepen the reader's experience, and which we could pull off as well. I mean, I really wanted a bunch more like funky 3D kind of. I wanted a big chunk of obsidian in there and like a piece from a gun, and I was being a little unreasonable, but it's my job to.
You're a writer.
Yeah. But I think JJ, he showed me these books that he had read when he was a kid by a British writer named Dennis Wheatley. They were like case dossiers, they're murder mysteries, and they came with like glassine envelopes of evidence and newspaper articles and like really cool. And we both loved those Infocom text adventure games where there would be like a rock in there and a magazine with an important clue in it. So I think some of that, some of the joy that each of us found in those kinds of works found its way into here.
Well, don't let me hog this. Question?
Hey, Doug. As designers, as storytellers, as marketers working for a company, we rarely get a completely blank page to create from. We're often given a box of the company's existing, like users, their products, the company's own stories. So within that box, what are your suggestions about being creative, getting really weird, and making the coolest story possible within that box?
That's an excellent question. I mean, it seems to me like it would be difficult to get anywhere if you aren't empowered to be weird, if you aren't empowered to try to do the stuff that, maybe someone will say no to. But I would like to think that it's having that margin for error, I think, that gives you then the space to start finding the things that are going to be distinctive and that you're going to feel most connected to. I imagine it's, I haven't had the experience really of having to tailor something to, a client's specs or whims. And I imagine that's very challenging.
Would you like to try it?
Wow.
Have some contractor dollars?
Okay. We can talk later.
Who'd like to have Doug hang out at our place for like a month?
But that's, I mean, I don't know. Can we crowdsource this? Is that,
Yeah.
Does anyone want to jump in on that? Like, what allows you to feel freest when you're working within that box?
Anyone? Comments? Question? Another question? Segue? Yeah. Hold on.
I feel like a lot of it's the attitudes of our, direct superiors, because we are in a hierarchy in a corporation for obvious reasons, and when you throw something out there from left field, if your wrist gets swatted, you're not going to do it again. Yeah. So I feel like that is so crucial, but I think it's also I think it's a culture that has to be cultivated.
Yeah. Yeah. Other question?
Hi. I bought a book at an estate sale that was about Baja, California. I got married there. I was interested in it, and I opened it up, and there was a letter inside, and it was from one family member to another, basically saying, it was from 1976, and they said, you should totally come down here. There's nobody here. It's empty, which is, a piece of history. It's not like that anymore. So when you were creating this book, how did you work with the book designer to come up with that piece of history, the pieces that kind of frame the part of the story with the postcard and the letterhead? How did you come up with any of that direction?
The designers, we gave them a list of things we wanted. So like, there's one piece in there that is, it's a mimeograph of an old document from an archive at a Swedish university. And they they took that and ran. Like they did that research, and they were incredibly detail oriented. And you could tell. One of the reasons this book came out as well as it did is that we were very lucky. Everyone got it. Everyone invested in it, and everyone liked each other, I think. So everyone was having fun doing the thing, like making their mark on the project. So yeah, so they did throw themselves into those historical details, down to the letterhead or the stamp, and the postcards. And things that we didn't ask for, they improvised, and some of the greatest design elements in here are things that they just came up with on their own, and said, "How do you like it?" So yeah, they would come up with stuff, and we would say, "Yeah, that feels right," or "That feels right. Can we tweak it this way?" But it was remarkably harmonious. It was just JJ, the designers, the editor, and me kind of getting together and making sure that everything felt right. But every piece that came to us was, there was joy in it. You could feel it, and I certainly felt it when I saw it. And then when I saw the whole thing put together, I mean, that's that was astonishing. But even just like a little thing, like on the inside back cover in the library stamps, you probably can't see that, but there's a little stamp that says, "Keep this book clean," which is a great sort of wink at the whole at everything that's going on in there.
Does it get easier? You've written a bunch of things. You've gone through life a bit. You have a 5-year-old you were telling me backstage. Does it get easier, or does it get tougher because you have more demands on your own creativity and your own bar just keeps rising? When you sit down to write, to really go forth on that journey, how do you feel about that?
I think it's a combination of the two. I mean, it's I have a sense of, here's what I've done, here's what I know how to do, but here's what feels stale. I want to try to do something more, and that that can be exciting, or it can be terrifying, or it can just stop you in your tracks. One thing about having a bit more experience is just that it's I know some of the traps that I get myself into, and I've got a bag of tricks that I can go to for getting out of them a bit more quickly. Mm-hmm. But I don't think writing itself gets easier. I mean, each project, I mean, you all know this, each project has its own set of difficulties or challenges. I think you get a little more deft, a little quicker at recognizing maybe what some of those solutions might be, but you still got to jump through a whole bunch of hoops to get there.
Absolutely. Another question? Anyone?
So I'm curious to know what you could do in the margins that you felt couldn't be possible in a regular novel format. Like, what kind of freedom or constraint did that pose?
Well, it was, I mean, in a way, you can say that the novel, I mean, that the margin notes are really just an epistolary novel. That is actually just an old form. It's just messages going back and forth. The freedom that I felt there was in it did offer some like once I got around. Once I got my head around the challenge of, okay, all I'm going to have is dialogue to work with these characters, it actually then, it ended up being a really rich avenue for characterization, because it was dialogue that they were, sort of calculatedly presenting to the other. What am I going to write in the book? It's not necessarily just immediate. And so those choices of what to reveal, what to withhold, where they start to lose control a little bit of the sort of mediated self that they're presenting. I don't know, that it might seem like that doesn't necessarily fall in the category of freedom, but it felt like that to me. And of course, there are some doodles in there and all kinds of, arrows pointing to this and this, and it's you can kind of see a little more of the roadmap of what the character's thinking. And yeah, and the freedom too, I guess, of having two characters engage really deeply with a text, which is another way of getting to what they care about. Here's what matters to me in this moment of this story, and here's what I think the writer was after. And the way we interact with literature says a lot about ourselves.
Excellent. Anyone else?
I have a logistical question. I'm sorry, I'm over here. Logistical question for the production of the book. You obviously were a major part of the writing that was done, but can you describe some of the project management process for that? Were you guys all on equal footing in terms of making the decisions? Did you act as a project manager? Did the editor? What were some of the things that worked? What were some of the things that didn't work from that process?
I would say JJ was probably the project manager. I mean, all of those, he really had final say on everything that we were doing as far as the design. We would, I gave the designers my list. They'd come back, or first the editor and JJ and I talked, winnowed down my list. We gave that to the designers. Piece by piece would come, and JJ would lead the discussions, the conference calls of what feels right about it, where do we want an adjustment, and then send it back, and we'd get another iteration of it. It was but every little thing, from the seal on the slipcase to the design of the S to the kind of distressing on the cover of the Straka novel, that was all, as I'm sure you can imagine, those were all individual conversations that we had. Everyone got to weigh in, but it really was JJ driving the train on that. But again, it was all pretty harmonious. Nobody really. I can't think of a single moment where I felt that anyone thought that there was like a grave error being made. So that's maybe not as technical as you were hoping for me to go. With a little guidance, I might get there.
Our project managers are looking for any help whatsoever to get a project through on deadline. One last question from the audience.
Hi, Doug. Thanks a lot for being here. Sure. So my question is, I'm right here.
Oh,
there you are. Okay.
So if you had an opportunity to do this kind of collaboration and you were sort of in JJ's seat, being able to pick the collaborator, any ideas who you would work with?
I would go with someone who had more of a track record than me. It's amazing to me that they asked me to do this, that this fell into my lap. What they said is they had read my first novel. And I think what they had said is that they thought I did it's a novel with a lot of characters and a rotating third, and they thought I did the various voices well, that there was a kind of flexibility there. So I think I would look for someone who was, who could do a bunch of different things well, who didn't necessarily have a thing. And who would really embrace the idea of a puzzle, or at least of a formal challenge, and really get into the question of like how is a story going to fit well within this formal constraint, and really dig into it. They told me they went with me because I put together a proposal that didn't feel like it was just trying to feed them, just step by step what one would imagine they wanted. And part of that was, I thought, there's no way they're only talking to me. Like, they have to have contacted 25 writers. I don't have a chance in hell of getting this gig. So let me make the biggest, weirdest, most idiosyncratic, fun thing that I can. Put it out, and they say, no, great, whatever. And they said yes. And it was actually like the big, crazy, idiosyncratic, wildness of it that they ended up grooving on. So that maybe that's my answer. I would want someone who I didn't feel like was trying to give me what they imagined I wanted.
Great. The last question for you. Piece of advice for the audience, how we should think about story. What's critical when we sit down? Maybe something we haven't thought about. How should we feel? How should we think about what we're about to do to make sure that we're doing the right thing when we're telling a story?
Well, actually, I think the first thing to do is you might need to offload the notion, or it's worrying about doing the right thing is, I think, antithetical to my process. It's only when I let go of that I can do anything at all. So this might be a disaster. Therefore, like, here we go. Let's see what happens. So that kind of abandon, or if not abandon, it's just giving yourself room to make mistakes and try stuff that's going to fail. I mean, ultimately, the most important thing, I think, in any kind of writing or any kind of narrative experience is going to be the emotional element. You know, what are your characters feeling? What emotions is your audience feeling? And I think all the gamesmanship and fun, meta-narrative stuff in the world isn't going to save a project that isn't actively engaged with emotion on every possible level of character, of reader. And so that's what's got to be locked in. But I think you're not necessarily going to get there as easily if you're tight about it. At least for me, I have to sprawl, and it takes me a long time I have to sprawl and make 100 mistakes and get the character wrong 100 times before I can actually get to what feels right. And the thing is, if you're forcing it, people can tell. If the emotions are bogus or you're trying to insist on them a little too much, people are smarter than that. They can feel it, and there's nothing worse than being told to feel something that you're not feeling. Mm-hmm. I don't know, did that translate into anything usable as advice?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, every single word you said here was just magic. Ladies and gentlemen, Doug Dorst. We'll be right back. That was awesome, man.
Revolutions came in waves. Water and steam, mechanized production, electricity created mass